Hello, listeners. This is sbfavor Thinking Podcast, and my name is sbfavor. My co-host tonight is Rebecca. How you doing, Rebecca?
Hi, SB. I'm doing great. How are you?
I am just moving right along.
That's good. That's good.
I'm moving right along. I had a really, really good day. My day, it just seems like everything just went by so fast. When you're very productive, things go by quicker, right? The hours go by quicker.
Definitely. The hours are going by quickly. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, what's on your mind tonight?
On my mind tonight is the subject of communication. I was just thinking, and that word just kind of dropped on me.
Mm-hmm.
How do we communicate? What are ways that we can communicate better? Who's the audience that we're communicating to? Do we have to adjust perhaps our tone and our way of expressing any type of words? And that kind of came to my mind, and what came to my mind was actually a scripture. And if you don't mind, I would like to read actually these two scriptures.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Is that okay with you?
Sure. Go right ahead.
All right. So the first one is out of the book of Proverbs,
Mm-hmm.
chapter 12, verse 18.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, there is one whose rash words are like a sword that thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Then the other one is Proverbs 18:21 that says, death and life are in the power of the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was just thinking, could my words actually heal someone? Could my words uplift someone? And when I have to communicate a subject matter, sometimes we might have to bring something that's a little bit more serious. And is there a way to go about that without offending anyone or hurting anyone and whatnot? What do you think about that?
Well, listening to everything that you just said and thinking at the same time about it, most of all, we have to know who we are talking to. That individual or group or whoever it may be, we have to know who we are talking to. And when we know who we are talking to, then we should know how to communicate. One of the things I was talking about earlier in an earlier podcast was how to engage to understand the person that's in your presence. And so when you learn something about the person that you are talking to, you'll know what to appropriate when you speak to them. And then, of course, it depends on the topic as well,
Right.
But yes, absolutely. I agree with what you said. Our words can bring healing. And if you determine what to say based upon who you're talking to, then you can make a situation better. A lot of times unfortunately, we don't pay attention to who we're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us, we just run off at the mouth, right? And
that's right.
I think that if you learn something about the person that you are talking to, like for an example, people in your family, you have siblings and you have your parents or your neighbors. You learn something about the person that you're talking to, then I would say that, you would know what to say and what not to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes people don't take the time to learn about who is in their presence or who they're talking to. And I think that's where I think we all go wrong with that. And then that's when we say things that are not necessary. And then we say things the wrong way.
That's right. So would you say that when someone is feeling stressed or they're feeling a little emotional, how would you tell that person what's the best way to communicate? Should they hold off, or
Well,
should they continue?
well, when you understand something about that person's emotional mindset, excuse me, when you understand something about their emotional mindset, what happens is you can determine what to say to them based upon, like I said, what you know about them and what's appropriate for that moment. Like, for an example, I'll use my daughter for an example. When I talk to her by phone, I normally can tell um, what's in the content of her voice by listening a little bit more closer. And if she needs more assurance, or if she's discouraged, or if it's something going on that I can help with or change by saying something, then I normally do that. But I determine what I should say based upon what I hear,
Yes.
and then sometimes we have to pray. We have to pray to know what to say. And I
Right.
say pray because, see, sometimes we all do things thinking we know it all. We think we got it together. We just think that, oh, I know this person, they haven't changed and they're this and that, and let me just do this and that. No, sometimes we have to pause and we have to pray and we have to ask God, what does this person need from me? As a parent, we need to ask God, what does my child need from me? Or our spouses and partners. We need to pause and sometimes ask God that question. What do they need from me? Because in an earlier podcast, I mentioned that sometimes we don't know the battle of what the other person is going through. We don't know their battle. People
That's
are
right.
going through things in secret, and they're going through things they haven't told anybody because people don't trust so easily to talk so openly. So, because people are going through their own personal battles in secret, we need to be more sensitive, to have more sympathy, and to know what words we can speak to help or change the situation. I hope that
I
answered
love
your
that.
question.
It does. It makes sense, and I love what you said, because I was going to say the other part of communication is active listening. You said when you're speaking to your daughter, you
Mm-hmm.
began to kind of get a sense of
Mm-hmm.
how she's feeling and where she's at, so that you could begin to use the proper, perhaps wording, in your conversation. And I do believe that body language, is important. And I know a lot of us are kind of like on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
and some of us do Zoom and we do Skype and whatnot.
Yes.
But let's put that to the side. And I think that you should look at a person's body language to get a sense of how they're feeling. And now I want to go to the other side, because
Okay.
this is coming to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, what about when, SB, when someone needs to communicate and they're afraid to? What would you tell that person?
Um, if someone is afraid to communicate, um, I would simply, in a relationship with me, if it was a family member, friend, or whoever, I think I would just be more open with them to communicate, to make them feel comfortable with me. I wouldn't try to force it. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't try to convince them in any kind of way. I would simply just be more open with them concerning me so that they could be comfortable with me. Because sometimes, a lot of times, when people are open with us, they express how they feel, they talk about what they've gone through, or they're just more affectionate in their words, because words have a tone, and
Yes.
the word warmth comes to mind. If you speak a word that's very warm to a person, warmth represents comfort. right?
Yes.
So when you speak a word that's comforting or a word that's warm or tender, then it provides a space for them to be comfortable with you. And then in that moment, something can happen within them, and then they might open up. But the key factor is to be very, very warm, because words carry content. We're talking about
Yes.
communication. We're talking about effective communication. We're talking about ways to communicate. We're talking about how to get people to open up to communicate. Well, sometimes when the other person is not talking, sometimes it weighs on the person that is trying to get them to talk. And that's why I said
Correct.
being warm, being very warm in your words. You know, a little baby that is born, I'm using this by example, what I'm about to say.
Okay.
A little baby that's born under, not developed, right?
Right.
They use warmth, right? When they put them in a little incubator, they use warmth to help the baby to develop, right?
That's right.
Okay, so the same thing happens when, in my opinion, when a person is stagnant and they're not developed to a certain level to express themselves, or maybe they're not as open as I am, then I would make them feel comfortable. I would provide some level of warmth in the conversation, which in turn helps them to be more open, or like I said, just be comfortable. The key factor is comfort. Because see, where there is no comfort, there is always a distrust. That makes
Yes.
sense? You
Yes.
know,
Absolutely.
right, because when we trust people, we have a level of comfort. When we trust people, we let our guards down. So
Mm-hmm.
that's basically, to answer your question, basically I would say just to be warm, be very warm in your words. Sometimes people just need to know that you're right there. Do you need
Mm.
anything? Do you want anything? How are you today? And if they don't respond the way you want them to respond, it's okay. But continue to be warm. A lot of times we make the mistake of expecting something too fast, because we give out a lot of effort into a situation and we want the person to reciprocate it. And when the person doesn't reciprocate it, we turn around and say, well, I ain't doing that no more. You know what I mean? We turn around and say,
Yes.
I'm tired of doing this, or I'm tired of doing that. But remember that love is patient, and love is long
Mm-hmm.
suffering, and love is gentle and tender. So sometimes, it takes time.
Mm.
This topic, it reminds me of been in situations in my life where I had female friends that had been through different types of abuse or problems in their life, and they
Mm.
trusted me, and there was different levels and layers to the conversation. And I remember the conversation so clearly, how they would become more trusting as they became more comfortable with me because of how I spoke or the way I presented myself.
That's
over
right.
over time, of course. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Yes, it does. And
Hmm.
I appreciate that point you brought up,
Hmm.
because um, we we have to communicate. We have to have someone that we can communicate to. You said this, and I really feel I really feel led to say this.
Hmm.
You know, men, women, teenagers, young women, young men,
Hmm.
um, might be going through a difficult time. There might be something happening in their life. There might be some type of pain that is causing them perhaps to hurt themselves. Maybe someone's hurting them.
Yeah.
And I want to say it's very important to get that dialogue out. We don't have to hold things in. It's okay to express your thoughts, express your feelings, but if it's a level of where you're in danger, you should communicate that right away. And the reason why I say that is because I know that sometimes it's difficult for people to communicate. It's hard for them to share their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for them to perhaps share about something that might be happening to them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a great opportunity to just remind each other that find someone that is warm to you, that you can trust,
Mm-hmm.
that you can share that communication with, you know. And so we talked about that. We talked about family and a spouse, a partner.
Mm-hmm.
And what about it in the work area? I mean, I even think that we need to be careful how we communicate in an email, because an email could come across offensive. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's funny you would say that because I get emails constantly. I mean, all of us do, but you know, I get these emails and I see these exclamation points, and I'm like, I'm saying to myself, like, who does he think he's talking to?
Who are you yelling at?
Yeah, because you know, I take it just what it means, right? According to what it means, right? So,
Yes.
but yeah, there's a tone to an email. I mean, you know, I would get emails from customers complaining about all kinds of things, and there is a tone to an email. So yeah, we have to be conscientious of how we communicate in all ways. I think that some people just don't even think about it, and that's the sad part. They don't think about it at all. I know there was a time in my life where people have told me, they said, well, Shrey, you know, you say things kind of strong. Well, I can't change the way I talk sometimes,
Right.
you know,
Right.
but I have become conscientious.
Well, conscientious? Yeah, I was going to say.
Who I'm talking to. Like I said a minute ago, you got to know who you're talking to. When I speak very strong and firm, there are some people there, they can handle it. But then there are some that they're a little sensitive, and you know, I can't speak a certain way to them. So, but like I said, I'm aware of who I'm talking to, and that's something that I have worked on. So now, like I said to you earlier, when I'm talking to certain individuals, you might hear my voice like a little kitten, and then when I'm talking to other individuals, you know, you hear my voice like, "Hey, how you doing?" You know, kind of firm, but
correct.
You know,
Yes.
we have to be mindful of who we're talking to, and
Correct.
but the email thing, that's a real one right there. But like I said, some people, they just don't even think about it. I just think people just, especially in work, everybody is going through in the workplace, so it's just like whatever. But
well, I think this is a perfect time
Mhm.
right now
Mhm.
for those of us who do work at home.
Mhm.
You know, I encourage us to kind of take a step back, and before we apply to an email, maybe that email that did have some exclamation points.
Mhm.
You know, how about someone who maybe forgot to take off the caps on their keyboard? They may have forgotten to take the caps off.
Yeah.
So when they send the email, it's all caps, and I'm like, are you yelling at me? You know?
Yeah.
And I think that I've learned in the 20 years of working, I've learned to take a minute back.
Mhm.
And I'm still learning this part though. Read the email in its entirety. Read
Right.
it from the beginning to the end, because I know sometimes I'm so quick to answer an email that it through to understand what the message really was.
Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of back to being being too quick. We're all in a rush. So
Yeah.
I think that email is a form of communication. Speaking on the phone, speaking on conference calls, and I love how you said you speak according to the audience, according to
Yep.
kind of like that level of person,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe that those things are very important.
Mm-hmm.
And effective communication, making a clear, kind of a concise message, and no matter what we're communicating, no matter what the message is,
Yeah.
we should
Yeah.
do it in love.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of times when we communicate, we just have to be responsible as individuals, because even though, I mean, as an individual, you could be thinking about how you're communicating and how you want others to communicate, but others, they may not be thinking like that at all. But I would say to anybody, just be aware of how you communicate and what comes out of your mouth. Then when you
Yes,
see someone um, in trouble, or if you want them to open up to you, or you want them to express themselves to you and they don't, just keep being warm. Um, just keep expressing yourself. Just keep loving on them. Just keep speaking positive. Just keep speaking life, and eventually that person will turn and communicate with you better, just by example, the example that you give. Also, we can't take it personally when um somebody doesn't communicate a certain way, because
true,
sometimes, like I said earlier, people are dealing with their own issues in their own life, in their own minds, and they might communicate one way in 1 hour, and then they can come back another hour and communicate as if nothing's wrong at all. You know what I mean? So,
correct, absolutely.
so that's why I said don't take it in a personal way, because you just never know what that person's going through. But all in all, it's the key factor is we have to be responsible as individuals to make sure that we're doing our part to communicate, to make sure that we're doing our part to speak life to them, and to just be an example. Just be an example.
That's right. Be an example, and just remember that you know our words are going to do two things. They're going to have two results.
Hmm.
Either they're going to bring healing, or they're going to bring pain. Um, and I know that's kind of broad, because sometimes you do have to tell the truth.
Oh,
You might have to let's talk about that. I mean, sometimes you might have to kind of be assertive, and you might have to tell somebody about your boundaries. Maybe they're crossing your boundaries. Let's say that. Let's say someone's they're crossing your boundaries, and now you need to communicate to them, but you need to do it in a way where it might be offensive to them, but you still have to get your point across, because we can't read each other's mind.
that's
What do you
true.
think about that, SB?
That's true. I mean, you do have to speak up. I mean, I know I would. I mean, I've been in many situations in my life where um, people have said things to me, or they've done certain things in my presence that I didn't approve of, and um, in a respectful way, I spoke up. In a respectful way, I said what I meant to say and said it again, and they respected me. But absolutely, you do have to speak up, and you can't compromise yourself. You just can't do that. People do it
That's
all the
right.
time. People allow things to happen and they don't speak up, and they compromise themselves. They compromise their own values, and it doesn't make sense to do that, because to me, when you compromise yourself, that's not self-love. You got to love yourself, and don't compromise yourself. But yes, you do have to speak up when you want to set boundaries, and when people want to blatantly disrespect you, you do have to set boundaries. I mean, if somebody does something in front of you you disapprove of, and you feel the need, you have to speak up, because that's not who you are. You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be a part of what they're doing or what they're trying to do. You do have to speak up. But, like I said, there's a way to say things. There are some people, I've said some things to some people with the right intent, and I said it respectfully, and they still got offended. But guess what? I do care about them, and I do care that I do care about the fact that they was offended. But then I said, well, wait a minute, hold up. I cannot compromise my truth according to how I live. I'm not going to. I'm not going to back up. So I would have a conversation with them and try to make sure they understood my intent. But if they chose not to at that moment to, understand, then I wouldn't keep talking about it. Of course, I would just leave it alone.
That's right. And I believe that wholeheartedly. You have to be true to yourself, true to your morals, true to how you love yourself. If you love yourself, would you allow someone to yell at you? No.
Wow.
So if someone's yelling and I have to say this, I've been in that situation where I had someone repeatedly yell at me all the way to the top of their lungs. And sometimes, we kind of for a minute we get passive and we say, oh, maybe they're having a bad day, or, oh, well, well, I have to have love, and I need to be understanding, and maybe that'll go away. Okay. But then it happens again and again and again. It comes to a point where you have to stand and you have to communicate with boldness and say, excuse me, I love myself, and right now you're not showing me love. You're being rude.
That's good. I like that.
Right? You're yelling at me. Yeah. You're being condescending. Actually, you're being a little abusive. So that person actually is communicating in a rash way. The words that are coming out of that person is kind of like a sword that's cutting and piercing your heart and actually hurting you, and you're feeling wounded. But sometimes we figure, oh, they'll get over it. Oh, well, maybe I need to just let it slide, let it go. You could do that.
No,
maybe they're having a bad day, but when we talk about habitual situations like that, you have to stand firm, be bold, and communicate effectively. You know what? You're crossing the line. You're crossing the line, and it's okay to be assertive and firm and communicate like we tell children, right? If someone hits you, you're supposed to say, I don't like that, right? But we were all taught that in school. Right. I don't like that. I don't like that. Don't do that to me. And as we get older, and I'm just speaking for myself, sometimes we kind of give people kind of like leniency and say, well, maybe that's because of how they were raised, or, maybe it's the type of job they have, or, maybe it's the pandemic, maybe it's the COVID-19.
Well, you know what? I truly believe that how you allow someone to speak to you says a lot about how you think of yourself. Like you said, you mentioned, self-love. I think that a standard of communication is very important according to what you allow and what you disallow, because in my life, I'm sorry, if you raise your voice at me, I'm not going to hear you. If you now when you communicating with somebody,
you're gonna say talk to the hand.
No, I'm not even gonna say talk to the hand, because the hand won't even be present, because I'll walk away. No, because I think that when there's a very intense argument or discussion, you can talk about something that's a little tense, without actually raising your voice to a certain level. I think that, in my opinion, when somebody raised their voice at you a certain way, I call it verbal violence. That's what I call it.
Verbal abuse. I agree.
I call it verbal violence because when somebody raises their voice at you a certain way, on a certain level, and they continue to talk to you that way, to me, I think it's disrespectful. And basically they are showing you that they care nothing about you in that moment if they're raising their voice to a level as if you're nothing at all.
That's
Because
right.
because two people don't have to scream in order to communicate. Because
Absolutely not.
if you're with somebody and you're screaming at that level, that's no longer communication. That's what I call verbal violence.
Verbal
And then
violence.
on the other hand, if the two people are using foul language, that's a whole nother content. Come on, let's
That's
keep it
right.
real. So
That's right.
I just don't believe that's effective communication. I think that
Definitely not. Yes.
to hear one another effectively is to listen and respond appropriately, but most importantly is to actively listen to one another. And while you're listening, be very mindful of your tone, because when you are mindful of your tone, when your voice starts to elevate to a different level, nobody won't have to tell you to lower your voice when you're mindful of your own tone. Because as an adult, nobody should have to tell us how to speak. That's something we should know, most of us, right?
Correct.
So, but that's my take on that. I mean, that's something that bothers me because, I mean, the people that I have in my life on a personal note, we speak to each other in a respectful way, and that's my standard. Anybody that has been in my life, they'll tell you, SB ain't going for that. You can't you can't speak to her like that because I'll leave you sitting there alone.
Yes. Yes. And you're right. You will have them sitting there alone.
Yes.
And so that's an action you will have to take in your reaction to that type of behavior.
That's right.
So you will remove yourself. So see, I
because I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be because see, I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be a part of that type of spirit, that type of energy, because that bothers me.
Negative energy.
Yeah, I don't want to be. I don't want to be a part of that. Right.
And that's not. It's not in God's plan for a relationship with a mother, child, for a spousal relationship. It's not in God's plan for people to communicate that way. And it kind of goes right back to the beginning of the scripture that I gave, right?
Well,
those words could bring death or life. They're in the power of your tongue.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. I mean, people, I think that, you mentioned the word healing. And I just think that if people were more focused on keeping the right spirit or the right energy in their relationship, they would be mindful of how they speak. Because it's easy to speak in a gentle way when you want to be treated in a gentle way. It's easy to speak in a loving way when you want to be treated in a loving way. It's easy.
That's right.
Nobody should be cursed at or, screamed at or, I think to me that's not communication. It's just not. I know it's some people out there, they might say, oh, well, everybody gets mad and you're supposed to raise your voice sometimes and it's all right to get off a cuss word every now and then and scream. Well, okay, if that's what you call communication, that's your opinion. You're entitled to it. But in my world, I think that you can communicate very effectively when you speak very calmly. When you raise your voice at anybody, you're basically saying, "Welcome to the disrespect me club." And I don't want to be. I don't want to be in that club. I want to give the respect, and I want to receive the respect. So that is why I try to practice what I'm saying in this podcast. I'm not going to tell you something that I have not already done. Now, that doesn't mean I'm perfect and I don't, fall short. If for some reason I'm speaking to someone and I feel, like I say, I feel the tone of my voice going up. That's when I'm like, nope, I don't want to be a part of that type of energy. I don't allow myself to get to that place. If I feel that someone escalates to that place with me, I leave them sitting there.
That's right. Leave them sitting there. So that's going to be the advice from SB today. You leave them sitting there. So if anyone comes across in that type of communication, and I think that this is a good point to bring up, and someone communicates aggressively in that manner, disrespectfully, abusively, or like you said, what did you call it? What did you say it was? Abuse, violence?
Verbal violence, I call it.
Verbal violence?
Yes.
Don't, ladies and gentlemen, don't tolerate that.
Well, you know what, Rebecca?
We're gonna do what SB said. We're gonna leave you right there.
Well, when I say leave them sitting there, I'm talking about like don't become a part of it. Because I'm not telling you, I wouldn't tell anybody like, don't be disrespectful, but you don't have to be a part of it. That's what I'm saying. But
That's right.
I walk on a serious tip. I do or would walk away. If somebody's raising their voice, I would walk away.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say walk away, I'm not saying I would, I'm doing it to disrespect the person or dismiss the person. But when I do it, people that know me, they know I'm doing it because I don't want to be a part of that type of energy, that type of spirit. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So,
and also, SB, there might be someone that's in a relationship like that. They might have a friendship that has that type of things going on.
Right.
What would you say to someone like that?
Whereas verbal violence?
Yes.
I would say you need to get out the relationship or change the standard in a relationship. And if that person doesn't want to communicate with you differently, then I wouldn't stay, because if someone loves you and they care about what you care about, they should be more than willing to change the standard in a relationship. I mean, I have friends, we talk about it all the time. If for some reason I don't like something or they don't like something, then we change the standard of the relationship. That's what a relationship is. You share your ideas of how you want to be treated, right?
Absolutely. So, you share your information. You exchange your feelings and your thoughts.
That's right.
Absolutely. And if those feelings and those thoughts and those ideas are not aligned with how you love yourself,
that's right,
and what you believe in, then it's time for a new friendship.
It's time for a new friendship. And on that note, we're going to wrap this up.
All right.
Listeners, I thank you so much for taking the time out to just listen to us again today. We appreciate you. And Rebecca, you got to keep on hanging out with me, because
I sure will. I love it. I love it. We could go on and on and on, but this is good. And I've learned something tonight. That keep that dialogue going. Keep that communication going. Just keep it going. Yeah,
keep it going, and just work out your issues, and at all costs, be a good listener. And as you be a good listener, make sure when you open up your mouth to inspire, speak healing, speak life, speak faith, speak hope. Because SB Thinking Podcast, we focus more on the solutions and not the problems to inspire. So thank you so much for listening. Have a good evening, good night, good morning, whenever you are listening to this. Just have a good day. And if you need to reach me at sbfavor@yahoo.com. If you need to reach me at social media, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at sbfavor. Thank you again for listening, and have a good day.